Hi everyone, Stepan here. In these chess meditations I'm going to talk about how to prepare for a specific opponent. Now the first thing I would like to emphasize, even though many people say that when your rating is low there's no need for preparation and that you should just play the board, I couldn't disagree more. Playing chess is like waging war, and having an advantage over your opponent always helps, no matter how bad you are. And whether you're rated 1000, 2000 or 2500, having an edge over an opponent is crucial, and not giving yourself that edge is simply stupid. I think that not preparing is missing out on opportunities to have easy wins, and everybody should prepare regardless of how low or high rated they are. As an example, I'm going to use myself, and we are going to imagine that I'm preparing against myself because I don't really want to talk about some random chess player. Too high rated people would be absurd to prepare against at my level, and the lower rated people I don't know. So we are going to prepare against me with the white pieces. So I have the white pieces and I'm preparing against myself who has the black pieces. And the first thing I would like to look at is the list of resources I've listed on the screen. Those are the ones I use to find my opponent's games. Clearly, it's very hard to prepare if you don't have any games of your opponents. My advice in that case would be, and that happens to me all the time, I'm going to be playing the Croatian League in a week, and there will not be too many games of my opponents, and it's happened to me 20 times at least that I couldn't find a single game. In that case, you need to, what I do instead of preparation with the time I would have spent on preparing for the specific opponent, I will take every single one of my openings with the color I'm playing. So let's say I'm white here, so I will say, okay, I play e4, what can my opponent play? And then, even though you don't have a single game, you can limit the options. Your opponent can play these 5 openings, in which case against the French I play the Tarrasch, against e5 I play the Italian, against the Russian I'm going to play knight c3, etc. So you need to put that in your head, and you need to know, okay, I'm playing this, this and this. Let's just go over my repertoire briefly. And even though you don't know what your opponent is playing, it will be time well spent, and you might find some interesting ideas to include in your game. It's actually happened to me that I've done that. I was preparing a variation even though I didn't know my opponent played that opening, and actually got it to work during the game. So it's not as efficient, but it will help. So if you don't have any games, just strengthen your repertoire. If you can find some games in any of these resources, then use them and proceed. One thing I would like to emphasize that I think a lot of people are missing out on is using Blitz Games. And for example, here I've typed in Stepan Tomic chess, and now you can find, okay, this was my old, I think you can't see the whole browser, but I really don't want to change things over. You can find my old profile on chess.com. You can also find my profile on lichess, because it's written on the screen. So very often by typing in your opponent's name, you're going to be able to find their online profiles. And in my case, there are probably 3000 Blitz games you could look at, and if you had a year, you could prepare against every single variation I play, and you will have a huge advantage. And it's not that hard to find out your opponent's nickname online, and that's as much as I'm going to say. So proceed from there. And of course, looking at classical games is going to be much more efficient, and you're going to see how your opponent behaves in classical chess. Now let's take me as an example. So okay, the first resource I use is chess database, chess-db.com. Here you can find almost every player's games, unless he is too low rated, but for my rating, and let's say from 1500 and above, there are games. It depends whether people put them online when on tournaments. You can click here, games, and in my case, since I'm preparing with the white pieces, I'm going to find a game. Me with the black pieces has lost, so let's say this one against Vidovicante. Copy paste the game, use your whatever you're using for analysis, input the PGN, paste, import. Okay, and now let's start. So what you're looking at is strengths, weaknesses, and weak points in your opponent's play. First of all, you need to prepare for the opening your opponent is likely to play. If you look at my games, you are going to see that after e4, I played c6 every single time. I never played anything else. So it would be absurd from my opponent to expect that during our game I'm going to play something else. Of course, it can happen. It happened to me, but 99% of the time you're going to be correct. So don't waste your time preparing for anything else. So take the opening. That's the first thing. Let's go on from here. c6. So I did play the Caro-Kann d3, and you can see here that my opponent played the move d3, the rare variation, which is slightly uncommon. Now you yourself with the white pieces might continue against the Caro-Kann with the move d4, and you've never played the rare variation. So now you have two paths to choose from. One of them is, since I lost this game with the black pieces and my opponent played the Breyer, you might think, okay, Stjepan is vulnerable to the Breyer variation of the Caro-Kann, I will play that. And even if he had prepared, analyzed this game and corrected his mistakes, he might be anxious because he lost this variation before. The second route you might take is, okay, I play d4, I don't play d3, I don't play the Breyer, let's find a game of his against d4. So now back to the drawing board, back to the games list, find another game I lost with black. Ostovic Matija, Tomic Stjepan. This one was d4, d5, so too bad. Let's go on. Klishanin, Tomic Stjepan, c4, c6. It doesn't work. And I know for a fact there are no more games of mine in the Caro-Kann in the database, so there's no more help. So you need to choose. Am I going to play d4, which I play usually, even though I don't know what Stjepan plays against d4 in the Caro-Kann, or am I going to play d3, the Breyer variation, and I can probably say with certainty that Stjepan is going to play d5, which he had played before, and this is the best move, so of course I'm going to play it, but whatever. So here you have to choose. If you choose to play the Breyer variation, then analyze this game. If you choose to play d4, which you normally play, then you need to start from scratch and think as if you couldn't find any of my games. I don't know anything. What I know is that I'm going to play e4, he's going to play c6, I'm going to play d4, and from then on I can probably expect the move d5, but then once I play either e5 or knight c3 or f3 or whatever else if I take, I don't know what he's going to play. So a smart way to play might be to choose the option with least possibilities. After the move f3, for example, the fantasy variation, black doesn't have that many options and the game is fairly straightforward. So if it were me in this position, if I didn't know what black played against pawn to d4 in the Caro-Kann, I might choose pawn to f3, the fantasy variation, because his options are limited, and it gives me much more time to prepare, and I don't have to prepare for that many options. To move forward, one more useful thing besides preparing for an opening is whether your opponent is young or old. Now that might seem funny, and on the top level it's irrelevant because everybody is between 20 and 30, probably 15 or 30, whatever. But in normal club chess, between the ratings of 1200 and 2300, you're going to encounter people aged from 9 to 79, and my eldest opponent was 81, my youngest was 10. So the general idea I have is that young players tend to be very aggressive, very impatient, and they tend to play tactical chess, and that the old players tend to be either too slow or too fast, and that they can't stand long games, which is natural. If somebody is 70 or 65 or 85, then sitting over the board for 5 or 6 hours is going to be much harder for them than it is for you. So if I were playing an opponent rated aged 75, then I would probably choose something different than the fantasy variation here. I might choose, I don't know, I might choose takes, and bishop to d3, the exchange variation, the most passive variation of the Caro-Kann for white. And this isn't specific preparation for an opponent, but logically it makes very much sense because it promises a long game, a long maneuvering, slow game in which which is going to revolve around minute advantages which you are going to have to exploit, and after 5 hours of thinking you are going to have an edge over your opponent because his body is just not programmed to think for 5 hours anymore, or at least not as efficiently as yours. So that's one thing I would like to emphasize. Another thing you have to find out is whether your opponent is aggressive or not. For that, you are going to have to look at many games. Blitz games won't help too much because people tend to be much more aggressive in blitz games than in classical chess. But any examples of classical chess are going to tell you whether your opponent is aggressive or not. Now let's go over this game. I know for a fact that there was a point in this game where I could have been more aggressive, and I was actually winning this game. My opponent was much higher rated. Here. Yeah, okay. Here before the move b6, I spent 45 minutes, lost most of my time trying to make the Greek gift work, bishop to h2 check, and then trying to bring my queen into the game, get my rook into the game somehow, and I just couldn't make it work. So had I played bishop takes h2, and perhaps it would have lost the game, probably it would have lost the game, I might be thinking now, okay, Stepan is an aggressive player, he took on h2. Now that I see this opportunity and that I think, okay, why didn't he take on h2? I might think that Stepan is scared, he doesn't like to sacrifice if the position is unclear, which is true. I never sacrifice unless I see concrete consequences for my opponent. I spent 45 minutes trying to make it work, I couldn't, I gave up. So I'm not one of the players who tend to sacrifice without knowing what will happen afterwards. So that's another key point to know. Now you just got to find this out from one game. If you have 20 games, you are going to have a bigger pattern to conclude from. Another thing is, after you look at many games, and blitz games do help here, does your opponent win, lose, or draw out of the opening, middle game, or end game? This is going to give you a clear plan of play, and you're going to know whether an end game is good for you, if your opponent is bad in endgames, whether you have to complicate things during the opening, or whether you have to play tactically and aggressively during a middle game. If your opponent is weak in calculation, then playing a complicated middle game will help. If your opponent lost 3 rook and pawn endgames and doesn't know how to play the endgame, it might be a good idea to trade off into an ending, learn the structure out of the opening, and then crush your opponent there. So all of these things take time, and after about, it usually takes me 3 to 5 hours to prepare well if I have 10 or 20 games of my opponent. And usually it helps, and this approach, I've seldom heard people use it, but I actually make a statistical analysis of my opponent's losses and victories, and I know that he loses most of his games here, or here, on move this, or this, and it helps me create a plan. The next thing, which is very important, is list his strong points. It could be strong points during an opening, during an endgame, tactical possibilities he found, and that way, after going through 10 or 20 games, after you've listed all the strong points, you are once again going to be able to create a statistical analysis, which is going to say, okay, Stepan missed a tactical opportunity 5 times, which is his weak point, but Stepan, I don't know, saw a pawn break every time it was correct in every one of his games 10 times. So you can probably expect me to find a strong pawn break, which means that playing an opening such as the bird's opening or the reti might be hard against me because I spot pawn breaks, and I might play f5 when it's correct, etc. You will draw conclusions which won't be as useful immediately as knowing which opening or exact move order to play, but this kind of in-depth preparation is going to help a lot. And the last point I wanted to make, which I think is crucial, once you are able to say which opening is going to be played with 50% certainty, you should prepare surprises, deviations, tricks, traps, and even bad moves, which are going to take your opponent's time, make him think, and perhaps make him blunder. What I do, I find 5 deviations or 5 surprises during the first 20 moves of an opening. So let's say we are preparing against me once again. Let's just take a blank board. So e4, c6, d4, d5. Let's say we play the advanced variation. my opponent is going to play bishop f5, which is the best move. And now let's find something weird here. The normal move is either knight f3, knight c3, h4, knight d2, or bishop to e3. Is there any strange move which I might play to surprise my opponent? I might try the move g4. It seems sensible. I mean, I have played it in my games, but I'm just trying to show you my way of thinking. G4 might be a good try. This is move 4. This is a very uncommon move. How does my opponent react? And here, of course, there are correct ways to play. Bishop to d7 is the best move. Bishop to e4 is the second best move. Bishop to g6 is fine. Bishop to c8 is weird. If I turn on the engine, and I'm going to prepare this with an engine, let's say my opponent plays here, which is the best move, I could find traps here which could bring me an advantage. And I'm going to find 5 opportunities such as this one. And I'm not saying that g4 is a good move. I'm just saying that this is the approach I take. I try to find 5 surprises during the first 20 moves, because that gives me increases the probability of something working and of me entering a position in which I could actually use that. Now, what you have to remember is that most people are prepared for good moves. Nobody is preparing for bad moves. And if you prepare moves which are not awful, playable, not the best, but playable, then your opponent is going to have a rough time dealing with them, because how to refute them won't be clear, and he's going to be wasting time, and there's a high probability of him making a mistake and you actually profiting on your dubious continuation. And there are tons of examples of this. Even in the World Championship matches, the 2800 players do this. They find moves which the engines don't approve of, but the normal players don't know of, because there aren't good moves, and there are tons of these moves. In each preparation you do, you could find one or two of these, and it could help you win some games. Okay, so let's recap. The first thing, use the resources I listed above, trying to find as many games as possible. There are many more, these are just the ones I use. Take all the games, analyze all the games, and try to find his weaknesses, his strengths, learn his openings, list his strong points, and find some surprises for him. I hope this helps. I know I used myself to prepare against myself, but I just wanted to give you an example of how my thought process works during preparation. I would like to hear from you if there are any resources or any ways in which you prepare which I haven't mentioned. Please let me know, because I need to improve my preparation as well. Let me know if there are any strategies you use, any hidden tips you have for me, and leave it in the comments below. Thanks very much. I hope you liked the video, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.